The long-awaited D700 review. I'll be honest with you, I have no idea what I'm going to say. If you've never seen my videos before, this will be news to you. If you have seen them before, then you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But I don't write any scripts. I don't prepare these things ahead of time. I don't have talking points. I just make a video about a topic I feel passionate about. I feel like I can speak honestly about. And I make the video when it feels right to make the video, when I feel ready. And once I hit record, I just tell you what's on my mind. I'm just honest about it. I'm not trying to make certain people happy. I'm not catering to anybody. I'm not avoiding sensitive topics. I'm just being honest. And typically, that is pretty easy for me. In the past, I've made reviews on cameras that I've considered my all-time favorites, like the Nikon D3S. If not my favorite camera of all time, it's one of my favorites. It's definitely like top three, probably. And I knew exactly how I felt about that camera. Me talking about that camera just came so naturally. It was a love letter to Nikon, a love letter, a love story, basically. I think even that video I might have called it a love story, because as much as it is absolutely a tool, it's a tool that can be used for professional photography and all that. For me, it is also a very emotional. I want to say nostalgic, but what word would you use if you're speaking about nostalgia, but it's still happening right now? Because with the D3S, there was nostalgia, like back when it was released, back when it was current, remembering how I felt at those times, how I'd felt when I used it in the past. But a lot of the emotional attachment I had to that camera was also ongoing. It was in the present. Every time I held that camera, even when I recorded that video, as I was holding the camera and just looking at the buttons, I was full of an emotional attachment to this camera. I loved that camera. And in many other videos, I've talked about whether it's my view on some aspect of photography or traveling somewhere or a certain type of photo idea or a camera review, whatever it is. I will bring up a camera. I'll give an example. I'll say, oh, back with my old Pentax K5. And then I'll suddenly accidentally start to talk a little too much about my Pentax K5 because there were so many things I really liked about that camera and so many things that it did really well. Or I'll suddenly talk about the very first Fuji I ever bought, the original X100, back when that was current and nobody cared about Fuji and they were in trouble financially. Or my first X Pro 1 and how I suddenly started buying all the Fuji stuff. I'll talk about, I'll start to ramble about my Olympus EM5 Mark II, about how that was the very first camera I ever bought brand new. That's how sure I was that I wanted that camera, that I didn't risk secondhand anything. I went straight to the camera shop and I purchased it brand new, first brand new camera I ever bought. So, and when I talk about that camera, I have a very hard time being concise because, again, it starts to become almost like a fairy tale, remembering that camera, remembering the places I went with that camera, the things I was able to do, just the powerhouse in that little body. And to this day, actually, some of my favorite photos I ever took are from that camera. As a matter of fact, if I lift my phone, you can see this lock screen. This lock screen right here, this was a photo I took of my son, Liam, who's 12 now. He'll be 13 in November. That was on his 5th birthday. I took that photo. It was middle of the night, completely dark room, and with all the lights in the house out and only this Darth Vader light on, being the only thing illuminating him in a pitch black room, I had that little EM5 Mark II and took the photo, and it turned out great. And I still, to this day, it's on my phone. It's my wallpaper. It's one of my favorite photos of him. So when I really, really love a camera, I start to get very whimsical and very poetic, and there's this wanderlust. There's this, all the fancy words. I'm not a wordsmith, but nostalgia, wanderlust, whimsical, whatever it is. I really loved these cameras. And if I don't like a camera, then I don't talk about it. I'll get rid of it as soon as I got it. Sometimes I'll hang on to it for a long time thinking I should start to love it. It just never clicks. And then there are those cameras that are in between, which is what this D700 is. Now, for you people who love the D700, you're very passionate about it. I'm not going to say anything bad about this camera. I love this camera. It's just in a different category in my mind, which I'll explain in a moment. The best way I can preface how I'm going to talk about this camera is actually compare it to the Canon 5D Mark II, which is totally unintentional. It has nothing to do with the fact that the 5D Mark II was a competitor to the D700. It has nothing to do with the fact that a million people have compared those cameras a million times. It's totally unintentional. It is purely just happenstance. So I've had the Canon 5D Mark II. I don't have it anymore. I sold it. But one of the things I said, if you watch my 5D Mark II review, is I said all these great things about the camera, because it was a great camera. But I also said in multiple ways, multiple times, how it just didn't grab at me emotionally the way that other cameras do. So, for example, on paper, the 5D Mark II is a way better camera than the Canon 5D Classic. It can do more. It does things better. It's whatever. I talked about all that before. I won't go into that again. And then I followed that up by saying, but I still prefer the Canon 5D Classic. And some of these things are objective. You can talk about, depending on which cameras you're comparing, you can talk about specific aspects of a camera, whether it's the control layout, or it's the menus, or it's how well the autofocus works. But for me, a lot of the time, I mean, obviously there's a little bit of everything. The actual use of the camera is a big deal, how it feels in the hands, things like that. But for me, the photo at the end of the day is what matters. And again, I cannot stress enough that I don't mean that in some, obvious sort of way where people say, oh, the camera's just a tool, it's about the photo. I mean, really, actually, as cliche as it sounds, like, the photo is the whole point. That's why we have cameras. We have cameras because of the photos we've taken before, the photos we hope to take someday, the photo that we almost got, it just got away, the photo that we can't believe we actually captured and it goes down as one of the favorites. Whether it's a photo that nobody ever sees, it's personal, nobody ever sees it, or it's a photo that ends up on the cover of National Geographic and it goes down as this famous iconic moment for photography in the world. It's all about the photo. And in that way, it's true. A great photographer can take a photo with anything. They will find a way and they will make it work, and that's absolutely true. But photographers, not all of them, obviously, there's a scale, but photographers aren't just worker bees. They're not just craftsmen using tools. They are more artisans. They are artists. A piece of you goes into the photo. That's why, if you're being honest about your photography, now obviously there's these guys who aren't real photographers, and I don't mean that in an elitist sort of way. I mean that in a real, like, let's be honest with each other sort of way. There are certain people who they're not real photographers. They don't love photography. They don't love the process. They don't have their own vision. Somehow, for some reason, they decided they wanted to be a photographer, or at least come across as a photographer, sell themselves as a photographer, make money as a photographer, whatever it is. And those guys will buy the gear, and they will try to wear the correct clothes and have the correct accessories, and buy the speed lights, buy the bounce cards, and the like, all the stuff, the best tripods. And they might try to make a business out of it. They try to play that role and be the photographer, whether it's travel photography or wedding photography or whatever. But their heart really isn't in it. That's not who they are. And you can tell because all of their photos just look like kind of poor imitations of what they think they're supposed to be taking. If they're trying to be a portrait photographer, then all of their photos just look like generic Google image results of like portrait photos. Same with travel photography. I knew a guy who really wanted to make money as a travel photographer. He was here in Taiwan. He was not Taiwanese. He was another foreigner, but I'll cut straight to it. He just basically copied Elia Liccardi, which kind of bothered me because of a whole thing I won't get into. But essentially, he didn't really have his own vision. He didn't have his own eye. He didn't have his own passion for it. He just thought that he could buy a very expensive camera, and as long as he had the latest, most expensive gear, he could make money as a photographer. So every single year, he would change systems. He'd buy whatever the newest, most talked about camera was, and he'd jump from Nikon to Sony to whatever, depended on what year it was, or Fuji. And he spent an immense amount of money. I can't imagine how much, but an immense amount of money traveling the world, essentially just copying Elia Liccardi's photos. That's the difference, though. There are people like that who don't really have their own vision, who are kind of playing photographer. And then there are the rest of us, what I would say the real photographers. It has nothing to do with being professional. It has nothing to do with getting paid. It's your actual vision. It's a piece of you in the photo, a piece of you in the art. When you are really taking the photos that you want to take, it's your vision, and you're capturing these moments that you are seeing in your way. Because we all interpret the world differently. We all interpret moments differently. You can tell. Part of the way that you see the world, part of the way that you think about things and rationalize things, and the way that you process information, who you are on the inside of it kind of comes across in the photos. The things that you seem to be attracted to, the photos you do take as well as the photos you don't take. Are you often close, or are you often far? Are you hidden in the crowd, or are you out standing alone? Do you prefer landscapes or people? Night photos or day photos? Do you like natural lighting versus artificial lighting? And a lot of the time it's not even a conscious decision that we make. It's just what we kind of like, and it ends up coming across in the work. And with cameras, it's kind of the same way. There are objectively reasons why some cameras are better than others, and why one camera is superior to another. But a lot of the time there's just this kind of subconscious emotional connection. This camera just feels right. Or there's something about the way that this camera renders the photos. It's special mix, whether it's the dynamic range, or it's the amount of contrast, or it's the color science, whatever it is. Every camera is kind of like its own film stock. Every digital camera is. They all kind of render in their own special way. And if you can see two cameras from the same manufacturer. They came out around the same time. They use the exact same sensor, maybe even the exact same image processor and everything. But the recipe, the details and the firmware and that are baked in to that specific camera make its photos look a little different than the other camera. So sometimes when it just comes down to the photo itself, you just like the way this one looks. You like the way that this camera renders. It speaks to you and it connects to you. So for me, I noticed that I prefer the Canon 5D Classic as an example. And to me, I thought, when I was talking about the 5D Mark II, I thought, man, I mean, it's technically a good camera and I can say all these great things about it, but I'm just not emotionally connected to it. To me, it's just a tool. I don't have the same emotional connection I have to my 5D Classic or my D3S or my EM5 Mark II. And then I went through, my files, my old catalogs, and I started counting up how many photos I had taken with each camera, and I realized that I had actually taken more photos with my 5D Mark II than any other camera. And a very large number, like a huge chunk of my favorite photos that ended up being the keepers, were from my 5D Mark II. It had kind of snuck in under the radar that it's like, even though the camera didn't speak to me emotionally, it was a workhorse of a tool and it did its job so well that despite the fact that there wasn't that emotional connection, it really worked for me. I got way more photos than I ever realized. I couldn't believe how many photos, like good favorite keeper photos, I got from that 5D Mark II. And that's exactly how I feel about this D700. I've wanted a D700 for years, years and years and years. I've talked about it in other videos, and I don't want to repeat myself too many times, but I don't want to leave too much out because this is the D700 video. But I've wanted this camera for as long as I've known it's existed, really, for a lot of reasons. So first off, there's just the body itself. Again, as photographers, many of us, whether we realize it or not, we are artists, at least a little bit. And I hate that so many people will say that what your camera looks like doesn't matter, because it kind of does. Now, it doesn't change the photo you get from it, but the way a camera looks, the way it feels in the hand, the way you respond to it, the aesthetics of the camera itself can absolutely change the way you approach using it, or how often you want to grab it, how often you go out with it. It will absolutely make you feel more or less confident. It will make you want to take photos versus like, I'll take it out some other time, And that's why so many people gravitate towards old film cameras, even if they don't shoot with them, is aesthetically they love the way they look. They're awesome little pieces of art. That's the reason why, one of the big reasons why I initially wanted the EM5 Mark II was its retro looks. Aesthetically, I loved the way it looked. I love old film cameras. I love old typewriters. I have a bunch of these things, and I actually use them. I love old straight razors. I love cars. I love just mechanical things. It's a big part of my life, actually. And for me, having analog, anything analog or anything that's tactile that I can physically interact with, it just does something for me. I love it. And that's this. A lot of people, whether they realize it or not, they're the same way. It's the reason why the Fuji cameras are so popular. It's because they have the knobs and the dials. It's a very pleasing tactile experience. And when I look at this camera aesthetically, I love the way it looks. I've said it before in other videos, but I've had the D800 as well, and I way prefer this over the D800. I don't care that the D800 has literally 3 times the resolution, 36 megapixels versus 12 on this. For me, even just looking at the camera itself, it has what I call these unapologetic curves. Very high, just that hard swoop as it comes up to this viewfinder and flash bump. Hard scoop here. Angular at the top. These little, I don't know if you can see it, but there's this little raise, this little bump that goes right over this top screen, which I think is meant to prevent that screen from breaking if something hits it. It's got this little thumb lip here on the back that goes almost down. It's probably about 2/3 the length of or the height of the body itself. It's got this flat corner. So if you look from here, it's kind of flat. Look from the bottom, it's kind of flat. There's this angled corner where they meet in the rear, but at the front, it cuts off that corner. It's this little smooth pitch, and it has a forward bump here that kind of surrounds this little focus selection switch, whether you want to switch between continuous or singular manual. I mean, there are so many little details as you look at this that I love. Aesthetically, I've always loved this. The way that it has this little, I don't know if you call it a command dial or control or whatever. There's some industry specific term I'm not aware of, but any camera that had this specific button setup, I just thought visually looked cool. And it was even better because it was so obvious of why it functions so well, why it's so convenient to have that. This very tall, pronounced knob that you can turn, but it won't turn by itself because there's this little locking button right here. So you push that and then it turns and it clicks, and it's very, if you hear this, you hear that click? It's very, even now, almost 20 years later, this camera is like 18 years old now. It's so tight and so precise, and it clicks into each section. It has specific buttons. A button dedicated just for ISO, one button dedicated just for white balance, one button dedicated just for quality of RAW, JPEG, whatever. You have a physical button for basically everything. It is rivaled only by the single digit Nikons, like my D3S had the built-in vertical grip, and it had a second little screen at the bottom and a couple little buttons down there, and I actually did love using that. But it's not far off from one of those single digit cameras. I mean, if I go through and I look at this here, I see that it has, see if I can show you as I'm talking about it here, but it has your menu button. It has your little key, your zoom out, your zoom in, your OK, all the typical menu stuff over here, which you can control with your left hand. It has your play and your delete, basic typical stuff. Then over on the right, you have a totally separate info button for your right hand. And then you have a physical dial. And again, listen to that click. This is your focus area. Flip it down to the bottom, that's single point. Middle zone, and that's basically covers the entire frame. You have the lock or unlock, for your little, again, I don't know if you call this it's not really a control wheel, it's kind of like a joystick. It's like an oversized joystick. You can push it in any direction. You can click straight down like a button because there is a little button in the middle. But even just here on the back, having direct physical tangible access, and I can also visually see it just by looking at the camera where my focus zone is going to be. I can just quickly change it on the fly. Is by itself, it's so awesome. That is such a useful real world, like this is something photographers actually use. This is something that's actually useful. I don't have to dive into a menu. There's a physical button where I can quickly on the fly decide where I want my focus zone. Then I have obviously auto exposure lock, autofocus lock for back button autofocus or whatever. I have AF on, again, back button autofocus, things like that. I can, around the auto exposure autofocus lock button, there's that physical button you push in the middle, but wrapped around the outside of that button, again, I don't know if you can see it, but wrapped around the outside of that button is a separate knob that you can grab and turn. And that allows you to select your metering, your exposure metering, which again makes sense. It's your auto exposure lock. And then if you turn the dial that's around it, you can then change the metering, the exposure metering for your camera. And you can go center, like spot metering. In the middle, That's like matrix metering, whole thing. Or go to the right, it's center weighted. So you have center weighted, matrix, or spot metering with a quick little turn of the dial. And again, if you listen, so clicky, so precise. Fantastic craftsmanship. This camera is made so well. So you have that. Of course, you have your rear dial here, and you have your front dial here. Like, again, any full-size camera. You have on-off, which again, one of my favorite features of any camera is an on-off button right here, right by the shutter. So again, as somebody who uses the camera, as I lift it to my eye, I can turn it on and take the photo and then turn it right back off. No, don't have to worry about sleep. None of that. I can keep the camera off as long as I want. And as soon as I want to take a photo, it powers up so fast and it's already right there by my shutter finger. I know where it is. I can physically feel it. I don't have to find it. I don't have to look. I can have this thing hanging off my side, literally, standing, just hanging at my side, and I'm kind of seeing a scene and I already kind of know I want to take a photo and I'm waiting for the right moment. Maybe I'm walking a little bit. Maybe I'm checking. I'm trying to get things to line up, get my composition. And there it is. All right, this person's walking in. There it is. And then as it's at my side, as it's hanging at my side, I flip it on. I bring it to my eye. I take that photo, flip it back off down to the side. So simple. That's where every on-off button should be, is right by the shutter. It's the best place for it. And again, if you hear it, very clicky, very precise. Not only do you visually see it and you physically feel it, but you can even hear it. There's no doubt that you're turning the camera on or off. You have your mode button at the top, right behind the shutter. You have your drive, like your exposure compensation button. You can hold that and then move the dial to exposure compensate, up or down, up 1 EV, down 1 EV, whatever, make it brighter, make it darker, which again, so convenient. It's just right by the shutter button. If I want to quickly say like, oh, I need this to be more of a high key or a low key scene, I just shift my finger back and hold the button. And then I can turn the dial. And I can see right in the viewfinder, it gives me information. I'm going up by 1/3 or down by a full stop, whatever it is. I know what I'm doing. And then as soon as I want to take the photo, again, I don't have to take my eye away from the viewfinder. I don't have to look. I don't have to check anything. It's just finger forward, take the photo. It's right there. You have these two custom function buttons right here by the lens. You have, again, a physical dial. Do I want to do continuous autofocus, single autofocus, manual, which again, don't know how well this camera is focusing, but right there, this little knob right next to the lens. You have specific dedicated flash button. You have just so many little buttons and dials, and they are so perfectly placed. Again, when I'm holding this in my hand, between that very long, sure ridge that fits my thumb perfectly, and that very deep grip in the front and the placement of that shutter, I can have this without the strap. I can hold this all day long and I never feel like I'm going to drop it. I can actually let go of it. You see that? It's so well balanced that even without having my hand wrapped around the back of it, I can just hook it onto my fingers and it'll hang by itself. I can actually let go and just have the tips of my fingers hanging onto this camera and it's not going to fall. It's so well balanced. The weight of the body, again, because of the way levers work, the weight of the body maybe wants to pull it down off your fingers, but the weight of the lens counterweights and pulls it back. So it's centered, balanced right down the middle of that grip, and it just hangs there. So then you add to it this very, very nice grippy thumb grip here, and you're never going to drop this thing. And if you do, I mean, you might have to replace the floors. You're gonna damage the floors. this camera will be fine, but you're never going to drop it. And again, and then when you're holding it here, I can very quickly reach down, change my focus zone, move the dial, change my aperture, shift the finger back, exposure compensation, on, off, take the shot, back button focus if I want to. I mean, very quickly I can reach over here and push one of these buttons to quickly change the ISO, quickly change the white balance, whatever it is. And again, just as a tool, I know I'm repeating myself here, but I cannot stress enough. From an aesthetic standpoint, looking at it, I love the way this camera looks. It's unapologetic curves, it's little touches like this command center right here at the top, this one little button cluster, this big, beautiful round viewfinder. Every single camera that Nikon makes that has this big round viewfinder is immediately, just because of that viewfinder, 50% more beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful aspects of any pro level Nikon camera, is that big round viewfinder. It is unbeaten. I've never seen a viewfinder that the viewfinder itself is more aesthetically pleasing or more attractive to look at than this one right here. And then ironically, Nikon also makes some of the ugliest viewfinders. For example, when I have my D600, that weird little squished square thing with a tent over it. But I don't even know how to describe it. It's what they have on their not pro cameras. The D750 had it. The D600 had it. A lot of the not pro Nikon cameras have that squished little weird shaped viewfinder, and it's probably the ugliest viewfinder on any camera. So this, just the round viewfinder, immediately it lures me in and I want to use it. So the aesthetics, love it. The ergonomics, the feel in the hand, how it literally feels in your hand, perfectly balanced, never going to drop it. All of the physical buttons to change everything on the fly, things being located in perfect spots that just make sense, everything being easy to find and easy to use. Nearly 20 years later, every single dial, every single button still has a very tactile, clicky, very sure, tight, precise nature to it. The fact this thing is just built so well, you can feel it. Again, with the click of every dial being so precision, like a well-oiled machine. The feeling in your hand, the balance of it, looking at it. This was a camera that had real passion put into it. Whoever designed this camera loved what they were doing. And they made no mistakes. This is exactly what it needed to be, what it should have been. And it's exactly why everybody loves it. Then, if that wasn't good enough, then you say, well, hey, it's all about the photo though. What about the photo? Well, it turns out this thing has great battery life, so you can take those photos for a long time. It also takes beautiful photos. Everybody talks about the legendary color of the Nikon D700, and that's true. Now, I will admit, because a lot of people ask me, oh, with the color of the 5D Classic, because it's known for its colors, versus the color on the D700, which do you prefer? And I promise I'm not trying to do this the cop-out answer, but I actually don't know. I want to say, oh, I prefer the 5D Classic, because I'm so familiar with that camera and I've had it so much longer. And when I think of the color rendition on the 5D Classic, I immediately have memories of and think of all these things that I loved about the 5D Classic, the colors, the this, that photos, and the way I start to get very, very romantic about it. But then I start looking at the D700 photos, and it has a totally different way that it sees the world, a totally different way that it renders, has its different strengths, but it's also beautiful. And the best way I can think of it, and this might not even be correct, but this is the way I interpret it, this is the way that kind of hits me emotionally on a subconscious level, is that when I think about the color rendition of my Canon 5D Classic, I think of film. I think of Kodachrome. I think of classic, beautiful saturated colors that also feel very natural. So, and I'm not saying it looks like Kodachrome. I'm just saying that's the feeling I get. This classic, beautiful, saturated yet natural, warm, just kind of creamy, like, just beautiful, beautiful photos. When I think of the D700, even though it's almost 20 years old now, it actually feels like the way it renders is very modern. It feels very cyberpunk, actually. I don't say that accidentally. I mean, if you watch the movie Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, I forget now if that came out in the late 70s or the early 80s. I know, was it 79, 81? I actually forget now. But anyway, that was it was the cyberpunk aesthetic, right? It was the first real look at this kind of dystopian look at the future. This cyberpunk aesthetic was, it's high tech, low life, right? So everything's high tech, but it's also dark, and it seems like it's always raining, and it's dark, and there's no sunshine, there's no plants, there's nothing natural. Everything's automated, everything's is machinery, all the lights are neon. It's this, but it's grimy and grummy, and it's high tech, low life. That's cyberpunk, and that's kind of how the D700 renders. Now, obviously, you can take beautiful like wedding shots during the day with natural light, and it renders beautifully, obviously. But what I have found the coolest photos that this thing takes, and where it really excels, and the photos that I want to take with this camera because it does this so well, is night photos. It's not just because of its good low light or dynamic range of those things. It's the fact that there is something magic that happens when you have a dark environment and then artificial lights. Like here in Asia, you go down these streets full of like neon lights and LEDs and some reds and purples and pinks and magentas, and there's a green and a blue and reflections off the rainy ground. When you see that kind of what you would think of as kind of the classic cyberpunk aesthetic, dude, this camera really comes to life. I mean, it excels so well. When I took it, let me back up here. I have used this camera as an everyday carry, just for everyday photography, whatever, family stuff. I've used this for wedding photography. I actually shot a wedding with this camera. I have shot indoors and outdoors, winter and summer, bright light, low light, natural light, artificial light, one single light source versus a lot of mixed lighting. I've shot it here in Taiwan. I took it to Japan. It does everything really well. I mean, we'll just look at just recently, well, kind of recently, I guess the year's moving pretty quickly, but when I took it to Japan this past New Year's, when I was there with the family, when I just took photos of family members were asking me, because typically I don't like people posing, like, hey, stand there and smile, I'll take a photo. I don't like doing that. Like, you guys can do that with your phones. Like, I want to have this kind of personal connection with the world that I see and kind of capture these candid moments is what I prefer. But we were on a trip together, so if an in-law was asking, oh, take a photo of us over by these trees or in this area, like, yeah, sure, no problem, take a photo. Even in these situations where it's a bright sunny day, there's snow on the ground, this is all natural lighting in nature, right? The exact opposite of what I just said. There's no cyberpunk aesthetic. It's natural lighting, bright light during the day, surrounded by nature, and it's gorgeous. The way that it renders the colors of their clothing, the way that it renders the white of the snow with a little glistening, the light coming off of it. Gorgeous, beautiful, beautiful rendering. When I was taking photos of my wife and kids, where they were at, whether it was, again, during the day or at night, just beautiful. That my wife was wearing this wool coat. It's like this kind of olive drab kind of green sort of color, and the way that it rendered the green of that wool coat, I loved it. I couldn't get enough of it. The way that the sun hit that coat in her scarf and it came off, it had just such a glow to it that looked so good. And then I took it out at night, and suddenly that became my favorite. When I walked around Sapporo at night with all those neon lights and the LEDs and the reflections off the wet ground, it didn't matter what I was taking photos of. Everything from taxis to fire trucks to just people standing in line trying to get some food, to the lights of the billboards, the empty streets, whatever it was, every single shot that I took in that city at night looked amazing when I was using this camera. That to me, that's when it clicked. Like, that's what this camera does. It does everything well. Again, perfectly designed, perfect in the hands, perfect ergonomics, perfect button placement, the sweet spot with its balance of everything. It might be the most well thought out camera of any of the old retro cameras, because other than the fact that you can always find a way to dog on a camera, you can always find a way to decide, oh, it's no good because of this. That's very much a spoiled mentality. So that people, oh, it doesn't take video. It's a photography camera. Who gives a fuck if it doesn't take video? For photography, it just does everything so well. But it was those nights, the nights late at night walking the streets, those winter nights in Japan, in Hokkaido, that those colors really popped. And that's where it's like, man, I'm taking boring photos that I don't even know what the subject is. It's just a building. Look, there's a building on the corner, but the way that it rendered the reds, the way that the white looks, as dumb as that. I keep on saying the white, but there's something about it. It didn't look off. The white just looked so perfect and so clean, in such a precise contrast with the colors. Like, it's very, very hard to describe. You just know it when you see it. But this camera did it all so well. Yet, despite the fact that I've been using this camera for, I don't know, maybe coming up on 2 years now, and I've used it for just about everything, and I've used it in a couple of different countries now. Kind of like my 5D2, when I'm not actively holding it, like right now, I'm holding it, I'm talking about it, I love this camera. But for some reason, as soon as I put it down and I walk away from it, and I start to think about the camera, oh, what should I say in that video? It's hard to think. It just kind of fades into the background. And that's what I mean when I say it was very similar to the 5D2. Because the 5D2 was doing its job so well that I didn't even realize how many good photos I was taking. I didn't realize how many of my keepers from that year came from the 5D2. I'll give you an example. So if you live outside the city, you live in a rural area, you don't have access to city water, you have well water. And then there's a pump. There's an electric pump that just pumps the water from the well, from underground into your house. And that pump will be running constantly, will last for years. And what it's doing is fundamentally important. It's providing you with water, whether it's to bathe yourself, to wash your clothes, to do your dishes, to drink, whatever, to cook with. It's doing a very important job by delivering fresh water to you at all times of day, 24/7, anytime you need it, without a break, for years. So the job it's doing is very important. But as long as it's doing it, you don't think about it. You forget that you even have the water pump. You don't appreciate it because it's just quietly and humbly doing its job so well that you don't even think about it. And that's very much how this D700 has been. Once I'm holding it, once I'm using it, I completely remember why I love it so much. But it's also very easy to forget why it's so great and to not appreciate it because it just does its job so well. it's not like you can't take a bad photo in low light. Of course you can. Every camera has its limits. But this thing does remarkably well in low light. Even as you see in the photos I've shown you, even at night with just whatever light's available from a street light or from a sign, I didn't even think about it. I had it typically set to auto ISO, or if I did switch to manual, I didn't keep it down at base. Like I would just kind of set it wherever I thought I could set it. If I thought I could do 400, I'd do 400. I thought, 800 is better. I'll go to 800 or 1600 or 3200. Didn't really think about it. Didn't really care. I just shot with what I thought I needed to get the shot because I knew from experience that it'll look fine. It'll be good. It's fine. Does pretty good in low light. And as I've said before, there's something unique about this sensor. The combination of the sensor, the imaging the imaging processor, whatever it is, when this camera does start to show noise, and I hate that I'm even saying this right now because this is such an oversaid cliche thing. It seems like everybody says this about every camera, and it's most often not true. So I hate that I'm saying it. I apologize ahead of time, but this does have a very organic looking noise to it. Like legitimately it does. The best way I can describe it is to say that the noise looks monochromatic. I don't even know if that's the right term, but what I mean is that when other cameras start to show noise, you can see that it's color noise. You start to see these little off colors, these little splotches of like green and magenta and whatever. Like it's really ugly. When this thing starts to get noisy, there's no color noise at all. I think that's why it looks so organic. It looks so much like film or something, because even though this does not, I'm not going to say this is film-like because it's not. The camera, the way it renders, like I said, is actually much more modern. In my mind, it's very cyberpunk, the way it renders. But the noise itself is film-like, if that makes sense. Because there might be noise, the noise might be there, but it's not these weird color splotches like the camera starting to struggle and die and fall apart because it can't figure out what to do. It's just this light coat of monochromatic just dusting over the photo, and it actually looks pretty appealing. I like it. So if this camera was not so popular these days and it did not have its legendary status, and I would tell you like it's this unsung hero and you have no idea what you're missing. But I think most people have already figured that out. I think anybody who isn't, remember I talked about the difference between a real photographer versus somebody who's just playing like a photographer. I think anybody who's a real photographer who really has a passion for this and has their own vision for how they want to capture the photo, and they're going to see the world the way they want to see it, and they're just trying to capture that moment to share it with other people. Like legit photographer. Any photographer who's used this camera no doubt loves it. The only people I've ever heard say negative things about the D700 are people that coincidentally just so happens that they strike me as not real photographers. They strike me as people who are YouTubers. They just want to have a popular YouTube channel, or they just want to look professional. They just want to have the latest and greatest and most expensive gear. They can do everything for them. They don't really have an appreciation for the process. They don't have an appreciation for color rendition. They don't have an appreciation for the artistic expression and the actual photography aspect of this. This is a camera that was 100% meant for photographers, real photographers, artists. I don't know what else to say. I know what I feel. I know what I'm trying to say. I just don't know if I'm doing a good job at expressing it and really getting it across. But even though I have this dream camera of mine, this is EF, and I do absolutely love it, I'm not getting rid of my 5D. which currently has this this Carl Zeiss 2828, the Distagon manual focus lens. I'm not getting rid of the 5D Classic. I have the 5D Classic because I love the 5D Classic. On paper, the ZF is a better camera. And there's a lot of things, the reasons why I like the ZF, I prefer to use the ZF over the 5D Classic. It's its own thing. But no matter how many megapixels, no matter how good the autofocus, no matter what it does, there's only one 5D Classic, and I'm not getting rid of mine. And that's exactly how I feel with the D700. There will never be another Nikon D700. Everything, more or less, is a moment in time. You see a car from the 50s, you see a 57 Chevy, for example, with those fins. Or you see, like my dad used to talk about the difference. You'd see the difference between, do you know how you tell the difference between a 55 versus a 56, or a 56 versus a 57 Chevy? And we talked about, the taillight design and this and that. It seemed like every year, even though you could see it was a 50s Chevy, every year there was a subtle little tweak to the design. Something different that really distinguished what year you were looking at, right? And because of that, it meant that there was never going to be another 55 Chevy. They did things a very specific way in 55. And it's the same with anything. Everything is a product of its time, whether it's for better or for worse. It's a piece of its time. And the D700 is not just a product of its time, but it's really a statement about a lot of things. The D700 represents, it was made in Japan. It represents not just Nikon as a company and their legacy leading up to this camera. Their many decades of photographic genius that led to this camera. The design of the camera, again, from an aesthetic standpoint, nothing was left on the table. They did everything they could to make this a beautiful camera. Every corner, every square inch, nothing was left to chance. The ergonomics and the button placement, everything was so precisely thought about. Every decision was deliberate. Every button that this has, and its placement, and its size, and its shape, you can tell, you can feel, you know when you use it, that was intentional. That wasn't an accident. They knew what they were doing. The materials, the build quality, the way that it renders photos, the color science, everything about this camera, the way it looks, the way it feels, and the way the world looks through the lens, the way it produces images. There will never be another like it. It's absolutely special. It's absolutely one of a kind. And real photographers know. Real photographers can appreciate it. You might not, for some reason you might decide that you need a modern mirrorless camera because you need the sticky autofocus for whatever reason, either for professional work or because your eyes are starting to get they're going and you're getting older, your eyes aren't so good, you need the autofocus to kind of do it for you. That's fine, there's nothing wrong with it. These are great innovations. I love disc brakes on a car. When cars started putting disc brakes 4 corners instead of all drum brakes, that was a good thing. Old cars, they still stopped, the brakes worked, but disc brakes were a good thing. Fuel injection was a good thing. Power steering was a good thing, right? Same with cameras. Just because I love and appreciate these older cameras doesn't mean I'm oblivious to the benefits of a new camera. Better autofocus is better. Better low light is better. Having more whatever. Every time they offer a benefit, whether it's more video options or more, better preamps for built-in audio, whatever it is, like there's so many even just aesthetically, again, oh, this one looks like a vintage film camera. They all have their benefits. Nothing wrong with it. But again, just because, like, go back to the car thing, just because a 95 Toyota Camry is probably a better overall experience, is a better choice as a daily driver than a 55 Chevy Bel Air, doesn't mean people stop loving the 55 Bel Air. Doesn't mean it becomes less valuable, or people want to own it any less, or want to drive it any less. In fact, it's the opposite. As the years go on and people look back, they really appreciate the Bel Air even more. They understand that it has limitations. They understand, and they don't care. They love the Bel Air for what it is. And that's how it is with these older cameras. That's how it is with this D700. You can be one of these little tech spec warriors and look at, you can do pixel peeping. You can talk about the number of megapixels. You can talk about what DxOMark says. You can be one of those guys if you want. I'm not that guy. I love to capture moments. I love to take photos. I love to freeze these moments in time and save these memories. And I love and appreciate these tools that allow me to do that. And yes, while technically, quite literally on a technical level, these older cameras are outdated and they aren't as good as the new ones, that doesn't mean they stop being as great as they already are. That doesn't mean they don't have anything to offer. In fact, again, it's the opposite. As the years go on, I really appreciate this D700 even more. The size, the feel, the buttons, the ergonomics, the way it renders. As more and more cameras come out, updated lens designs, all this stuff, everything is becoming increasingly clinical. It makes you look back at this and really appreciate this magic in the way that it seems to render things. Not technically as good, not as precise, not as clinical, but it's beautiful. And it's a joy to use. And I'm not going to get rid of mine. Anyway, I've talked enough. Way too much, actually, as I typically do, but that's it. That's the D700 in 2025. Sorry I couldn't get it out sooner, but life is life. Anyway, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you later.